Let me ask you a question. How do you lose $1 billion in just 4 days?
Well, first, you try to buy the world. Or, at least all of its silver.
And that is the incredible story we are diving into today. This is Silver Thursday, a high-stakes gamble that pushed the entire global financial system right to the very edge of collapse.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We got to go back to the late 1970s, which was a time of just total economic chaos. And even if you were one of the richest people on the entire planet, you had a very, very serious problem.
That problem, in one word, was inflation. See, after the US ditched the gold standard back in '71, the value of a dollar just kept falling and falling and falling. Now, for the average person, things were tough. But for the ultra-wealthy, for them, watching their fortunes just dissolve into thin air, it was a 5-alarm fire. Every single dollar in the bank was worth less tomorrow than it was today. Cash was basically trash, and real hard assets were king.
And this is where our main characters step onto the stage, the Hunt brothers, Nelson, William, and Lamar. Now, as heirs to a legendary Texas oil fortune, these guys were sitting on billions. But they were watching in horror as that mountain of paper money was being eaten away, day by day, by a force they just couldn't control.
You see, the Hunts had this deep, fundamental distrust of the modern financial system. They believed that governments and banks were actively devaluing currency on purpose. They didn't want their wealth in numbers on a computer screen or promises on a piece of paper. They wanted it in something real, something tangible you could literally hold in your hand.
So they asked themselves a question that would end up changing financial history. How could they find an anchor in this economic storm? How could they protect their dynasty not just for a few years, but for generations to come? Their answer was audacious. It was a plan so colossal, so ambitious, that it wouldn't just protect their fortune, it would bend the entire global market to their will.
Their strategy was to corner the silver market. Now, the idea here is pretty simple, but it is incredibly bold. If you buy up enough of something, so much that you basically become the main supplier, you don't have to follow the market price anymore. You become the market price. And the Hunts saw silver as the perfect target. It's a precious metal, it has real industrial uses, but they believed it was massively, massively undervalued.
And their plan was brutally effective. First, they bought physical silver. We're talking millions of ounces of it, stored away in vaults in Switzerland. Second, they bought silver futures. Now, a futures contract isn't the silver itself. It's a promise to buy it at a set price down the road. By buying tons of these, they were creating huge future demand, which drove up the price right now. And third, and you've got to remember this part because this is the fatal key, they used massive amounts of borrowed money, what we call leverage, to multiply their buying power. For every $1 of their own money they put down, they could borrow 9 or 10 more. It meant they could control billions of dollars worth of silver with just a tiny fraction of that in their own cash. This wasn't just an investment, this was a hostile takeover of a global commodity. And at first, it worked spectacularly. I mean, by the end of 1979, the Hunts controlled an estimated 1/3 of the entire world's private silver supply. Think about that for a second. A single family had quietly taken control of 1/3 of a critical global commodity.
The effect was absolutely explosive. In just 1 year, the price of silver shot up from about $6 an ounce to a peak of nearly $50 an ounce. That is an increase of over 700%. The Hunt brothers had made billions, at least on paper, and for a moment they looked like unstoppable financial titans.
But here's the thing. When you make a bet this big, you don't just make money, you make enemies, powerful enemies. And the Hunt brothers were about to learn the #1 rule of high finance. You don't fight the people who make the rules.
The public backlash was intense. I mean, industries that needed silver, like photography or jewelry, were getting absolutely crushed by these high prices. The famous jeweler Tiffany & Co. even took out a full-page ad in the New York Times publicly shaming the brothers for their unconscionable hoarding.
But the real threat? Oh, that came from the financial establishment itself. The Federal Reserve, led by the legendary inflation fighter Paul Volcker, saw what the Hunts were doing not as some clever trade, but as a dangerous manipulation that threatened to destabilize the entire economy. As one Fed official said later, Volcker had an unbelievable instinct, and he immediately saw the potential for a massive financial crisis.
So the establishment fought back by changing the rules of the game right in the middle of play.
The commodity exchange, COMEX, suddenly introduced something called Silver Rule 7. This new rule basically slammed the brakes on using borrowed money for buying silver futures. It effectively said, you can sell what you have, but you can't buy any more on margin. It was a sniper shot, aimed directly at the heart of the Hunt's leveraged empire.
And just like that, the trap was set. The very leverage that had allowed the Hunts to build their silver kingdom was now a ticking time bomb. They were completely overextended, and their ability to keep borrowing and pushing the price up had just been completely cut off.
With their buying power gone, the Hunts could no longer prop up the price. It started to wobble, then it began to fall. And very soon, their entire house of cards came crashing down with breathtaking speed.
As the price of silver plummeted, the brokers who had lent the Hunts billions, they panicked. They issued a margin call, which is basically the bank screaming at you. The asset you used for your loan is tanking. We need more cash right now to cover the difference. And the bill? A staggering $100 million. It was money the Hunts simply did not have. All their wealth was tied up in silver, which was now worth less and less every single minute.
On March 27, 1980, a day now infamous as Silver Thursday, they missed the payment. And then all hell broke loose. Their brokers started force-selling the Hunt silver to cover their own losses, which created a tidal wave of supply that just cratered the price. Silver collapsed by more than 50% in just 4 days. The panic spread like a virus, from commodities to the stock market, threatening a full-blown financial meltdown.
The personal cost for the brothers was just catastrophic. They lost over $1 billion in the collapse. And over the next decade, their family fortune, which was once estimated at $5 billion, would shrivel to less than $1 billion.
But the story doesn't end there, because when a financial whale that big goes down, it threatens to drag everyone else down with it. The brokers and banks that had financed the Hunt's wild ride were now on the hook for those massive losses. This was a classic too-big-to-fail moment. The fall of the Hunt brothers threatened to set off a chain reaction of defaults that could topple some of the biggest names on Wall Street and potentially freeze the entire credit system. So, to stop the bleeding, a group of banks with some heavy, let's call it persuasion, from Fed Chairman Volcker, cobbled together a massive bailout loan for the Hunts, $1.1 billion. It was a really controversial move, but it was seen as necessary to prevent a total market catastrophe. But here's the thing to remember. That bailout didn't save the brothers. It saved the system. The Hunts themselves were hit with lawsuits, investigations, and fines. Ultimately, they were found liable for market manipulation, banned from trading for life, and in 1988 were forced to declare one of the largest personal bankruptcies in history. Nearly half a century later, the story of Silver Thursday is still this classic cautionary tale. It's a powerful lesson about the dangers of using too much leverage, the madness of speculative bubbles, and why trying to fight the world's most powerful financial institutions is a game you're almost certain to lose. You can see its echoes in the GameStop saga, in crypto meltdowns, and in every story of a market mania that ends in a crash. Which leaves us with one final question. Were the Hunt brothers financial visionaries trying to protect their family from a broken system, only to be crushed by that same system when they got a little too close to the sun? Or was this just a story of epic, world-breaking greed? I'll let you decide.